The orbital palace Aurum was a monument to things that should not exist. It hung in the black, a spindle of spun gold and living crystal, tethered to the void by physics and arrogance. Below it, the planet. Aurelia shimmered, wrapped in the soft, pulsating glow of the biophoton lattice. The lattice was the Empire's miracle and its leash, a web of organic light that managed everything from the planetary climate to the circadian rhythm of the smallest Aurelian fledgling. And here, on Aurum, in the guts of the palace, Orion Harlow kept it from killing everyone. He was a ghost in the machine, a human mechanic in an empire of avian draconic beings who viewed him as clever, greasy plumbing. Orion wiped a smudge of conductive gel from his cheek, the sharp, ozone tang of it cutting through the recycled air. He was, by trade, a systems architect. By necessity, he was a mechanic. By choice, he was an exile. His cramped workshop smelled of hot metal, roasted coffee beans, and the faint, sweet scent of his daughter's crayons. Nova, 7 years old and all that remained of his old life, sat cross-legged on a workbench, drawing. "She needs wings, Daddy," Nova said, holding up her wax paper creation. It was a stick figure of him, a smaller stick figure of her, and a blob-like third figure. "This is Mama, but this one, she needs wings, like everyone here." Orion's heart did its familiar, painful clench. "We don't have wings, little star. We're human. We build wings." "I know," she said, her small voice patient, as if explaining to him. "I mean for the new Mama, so we can be a family." He looked at the drawing, at the empty, winged space she was saving. His wife, Alara, had been dead for 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days. She had died in the fire, in the catastrophe he had failed to stop, the one that had made him flee the human coalition with the most dangerous secret in the galaxy locked in his genetic code, the Keymaker Command. The command that could rewrite living infrastructure. The command that had made him a core architect, and then a widower. He had sworn an oath over Alara's ashes that he would never use it again. He would just be a father. He would just be a mechanic. He would just be... "Nova," he started, gently. "We talked about this. We are a family." "I know," she said again, not looking up from her drawing. "It's just... incomplete." The wall chime pinged. Orion sighed, knowing exactly who it was. He thumbed the comm. "What? Bram. Don't, what? Bram me, Harlow." A gravelly voice crackled. "Bram Tacker, ex-coalition sapper, current owner of the Twilight Diner, and the closest thing Orion had to a friend. It's 7:30. Your table is set. Your suit is clean. My synth steak is marinating. Are you going to break this nice lady's heart, or just mine?" Orion stared at his grease-blackened fingernails. "I'm breaking yours, buddy. I can't. Nova needs to see her dad talk to someone who doesn't have rivets." Bram cut in. "Orion, it's a blind date, not a life sentence. You've been on this rock for 3 years. You fixed their toilets. You patched their lattice. But you won't eat a meal with one of them, the Empress's own head nurse. Saris Anu, that's top shelf, man. She's a trauma specialist. Pediatrics." Orion felt a flash of irritation. "I don't need a specialist. Bram." "No." Bram's voice softened. "But the kid does. She needs a life. You're hiding. Orion. You think because you're the only human maintenance tech on a station of 20,000 Aurelians. Nobody sees you. They see you. She sees you. Just show up. 1 hour. For Nova." The line clicked off. Orion looked at Nova, who was now carefully drawing a tiny, feathered wing on the empty space in her picture. He felt cornered by his own grief, by his daughter's quiet, powerful yearning. He hated this. He hated the hope. Hope was what got Alara killed. "All right, little star," he sighed, lifting her off the bench. "Go put on your good shoes. We're going to see Uncle Bram." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. "And the lady the nurse." "And maybe the nurse," he conceded. "But just for a little while, and no promises." She threw her arms around his neck, a sudden, fierce hug that smelled of crayons and childhood. "Thank you, Daddy." The Twilight Diner was tucked into the commercial ring of Aurum, a bubble of chrome and neon overlooking the majestic curve of the planet below. It was an oasis of human kitsch in a sea of Aurelian crystal. The air smelled of fried onions, synthetic whiskey, and Bram's proprietary asteroid dust spice mix. It was loud. It was comforting. Bram, a mountain of a man with a scarred face and a bright red apron, spotted them from behind the bar. He gave Orion a discreet, massive thumbs up. "Table 4, by the viewport." Bram grunted as Orion passed, ruffling Nova's hair. "And Harlow, be nice." Orion settled Nova into the booth with her datapad and crayons. "Be good, little star. I'll be right here." He slid into the opposite booth. Table 4. He checked his wristcom. 7:50. She was late. He felt a ridiculous surge of relief. Maybe she wouldn't show. Maybe he could grab a burger with Nova and call it a win. He could tell Bram he tried. A shadow fell over his table. Orion Harlow. He looked up and up. The Aurelians were tall, avian draconic humanoids with scaled skin, elegant faces, and impressive, vestigial wings that they kept folded against their backs in pressurized environments. This woman, however, was different. She was Aurelian, yes, with skin the color of pale jade and eyes like polished amber. But where most Aurelians he dealt with were soldiers or aristocrats, radiating a sharp, predatory arrogance. She radiated calm. Her wings, a cascade of muted teal and bronze, were clipped short, bound in the practical, modest style of someone who worked indoors, in tight spaces. She wore a simple, charcoal gray tunic, not the flowing robes of the court. She was tidy, professional, and she was looking at him with an unnervingly direct, intelligent gaze. This was Saris Anu. "That's me," he said, standing awkwardly. "Ms. Anu. Saris, please." She inclined her head, a graceful, bird-like gesture, and slid into the booth opposite him. She didn't smile. Not exactly, but the corners of her eyes crinkled. "Mr. Harlow, you are punctual. Bram assured me you were the perpetually late mechanic type." "I'm full of surprises," Orion muttered, sitting back down. Can I get you something?" "Chamomile tea, please. It has been," she paused, "a long shift." "Right. The Empress." The words were out before he could stop them. It was the rumor of the entire station. The Empress was dying, her light fading, and the biophoton lattice, tied to her life force, was growing unstable. In her place, the regent, Malachor Thorn, had taken control. Thorn was a hawk-faced, silver-scaled Aurelian with a penchant for military parades and security checkpoints. His face was plastered on every screen, promising stability through strength. Orion despised him. Saris's expression didn't change, but her amber eyes cooled by a single, perceptible degree. "The Empress's health is a private matter. I am a nurse in the Royal Pediatric Wing." "Oh, right," Orion flushed. "Bram said, head nurse." "A title," she said dismissively. "I tend to fledglings and complications. The court has many." An awkward silence fell. He could see Nova in the next booth, peeking over the seat, her eyes wide with hope. He had to try. "So, he said, gesturing vaguely. A diner. Not very. Imperial. Why here? I like diners, Saris replied, accepting a steaming mug from a server bot. She wrapped her long, jade-colored fingers around it. He noticed her hands. They were steady, the nails clipped short. A healer's hands. They are honest. The food is what it is. The people are what they are. There is no protocol for ordering synth fries. He found himself smiling. A real, actual smile. Good point. Bram's fries are a violation of several protocols. Mostly thermodynamic. She almost smiled back. And you, Mr. Harlow. The only human systems architect on Aurum. A man who can apparently reroute a primary plasma conduit using kitchen foil and a bootlace. Or so Bram claims. Bram exaggerates. It was thermal tape, not foil. Why are you here? An architect of your reputation could be anywhere, at the core, back on Earth. The smile vanished from his face. The casual question landed like a blow. The core. He thought of the fire, of Alara's screams, of the system he had built collapsing because of a single, corrupted line of code he had missed. The keymaker's failure. Aurum is quiet, he said, his voice flat. I have my work. I have my daughter. It's enough. Saris watched him, her gaze analytical, but not unkind. You are a widower. It wasn't a question. Yes. And the child. Nova. She is why you are here. On this date. You are doing this for her. Orion felt a flash of defensiveness. Is that a problem? No, Saris said softly. She looked past him, at Nova, who quickly ducked back behind the booth. It is a compelling motive. To put a child's hope before one's own comfort. She looked back at him. Or one's own grief. Before he could process that, before he could decide if he was impressed or infuriated by her perception, the universe tore apart. It started not with a sound but with a feeling, a deep, somatic lurch. The lights in the diner, usually a warm yellow, flickered to a sickening, pulsing red. The ambient thrum of the station's engines went silent, replaced by a high-pitched, wailing siren. Lacuna! A synthesized voice boomed over the comms. Biophoton lattice fluctuation detected. All sectors, seal and hold. This is a level 3 alert. Diners screamed. Chairs toppled. But Orion was already moving. His paternal instinct. His engineer's training. It all snapped into place. Nova. He was out of his booth and pulling her from hers in a single motion, hoisting her onto his hip. She buried her face in his neck, trembling. Daddy, what's happening? It's okay, little star. Just a power dip. He was lying. A lacuna was not a power dip. It was a hole, a void in the lattice. He turned back to Saris. The blind date was over, shattered by the klaxon. He had to get Nova to his workshop, to the reinforced safe room he had built behind the coolant processors. Look, I'm sorry, this was... He started, ready to run. He stopped. Saris was not screaming. She was not panicking. She was standing perfectly still, her head tilted, her eyes locked on the diner's main console, which was now flashing a detailed schematic of the affected area. Her face was pale, but it was the pallor of intense focus, not fear. Bio-frost leak, she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the alarm. Primary coolant breach, Sector Gamma, the Royal Creche. The creche, Orion breathed. He knew the layout. The creche was tied directly into the palace's life support, a bioorganic system that was notoriously delicate. A biofrost leak wasn't an accident, not with that many safeties. It was sabotage. He held Nova tighter. We're out. Good night, Saris. He turned to join the small stampede of civilians heading for the emergency hatches. "I'm going," she said. He stopped again, turning back. "Going where it's a level 3 lockdown. They're sealing the bulkheads." "To my post," she said. She was already moving, not toward the exit, but toward a service panel by the kitchen. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something crack in her professional calm. It wasn't fear. It was a cold, profound rage. "I'll be there," she said, more to herself than to him. She swiped a silver card, a high-level override he had never seen before, and the panel hissed open, revealing a dark, restricted access corridor. She paused, just for a second, her amber eyes locking on his. A flicker of something deeply personal, a sudden, devastating pain, crossed her features. With the child. And then she was gone. She plunged into the service tunnel, running against the flow of escaping civilians, heading directly for the epicenter of the alarm. Orion stood frozen for a beat, the wail of the siren filling his ears, his daughter's small arms locked around his neck. He was left in the wreckage of his blind date, abandoned by a woman running into the disaster. With the child. What did she mean his child was here, safe in his arms? It took him half a second to connect the data points. Her job, pediatrics. Her destination, the creche. Her look of pain. Her child. Her child was in there. He looked at the panicking crowd fighting for the exits. He looked at the dark, forbidden tunnel Saris had vanished into. He was safe. He had Nova. He could leave. This was not his fight. He had sworn. He was just a mechanic. He was just a father. But he had also seen the schematic on the console. A biofrost leak in the creche's nutrient buffer. It wasn't a simple break. The safeties had been bypassed. The overflow valves deliberately clamped. This was an engineered failure. This was an attack. He felt the cold, familiar ghost of his past, the shadow of the keymaker, rise up in him. The feeling of watching a system cascade into failure. The feeling of being the only one who knew how to fix it. The feeling that had cost Alara her life. "Daddy!" Nova's voice was a small, terrified whisper in his ear. "That lady, she went to help. Are the other kids okay?" He looked at his daughter's face, her eyes wide with a fear that was slowly being replaced by a child's simple, heartbreaking sense of justice. She went to help. Saris Anu had a child in that freezing, dying room. She had run toward that nightmare, trusting him to. What just leave? He made a different choice. "Hold on tight, little star," Orion said, his voice a low growl he barely recognized. He settled her more securely on his hip and grabbed a heavy, insulated tablecloth from a nearby table, wrapping it around her. He turned and ran. Not for the public exit, but for the dark, open maw of the service tunnel. "Daddy, where are we going?" "We're going to make sure," he said, plunging into the darkness. "We're going to help the nurse." The service corridor was a cramped, vibrating tube of metal, a stark contrast to the soaring architecture of the palace. The alarms were louder here, echoing off the pipes, and the air was already colder. Orion ran, his breath pluming. Nova, a solid, warm weight against his chest, her small arms locked tight around his neck. He had wrapped the tablecloth around her like a papoose, leaving his arms free. "It's just a maintenance run, little star," he panted, lying more to himself than to her. "We're just checking the pipes." He burst through the far bulkhead door and into the royal creche. The scene stopped him cold. The creche was, or had been, beautiful. It was a vast, open biosphere designed to mimic an Aurelian forest floor, with soft, phosphorescent moss, gentle heat pools, and bioorganic alcoves where the fledglings slept. Now, it was a crystalline nightmare. A primary coolant line, thick as his torso, had ruptured. A shimmering, razor-sharp mist of biofrost was spewing into the air, flash freezing everything it touched. The moss was a field of brittle ice. The heat pools were frozen solid, and the alcoves. Their internal lights were flickering, dimming, their life support systems choking on the cold. In the center of the room, kneeling on the frozen moss, was Saris Anu. She was surrounded by a small, terrified cluster of Aurelian children, fledglings. They were small, no older than Nova, with soft, downy proto-wings and wide, black eyes, weeping silently. Saris was a beacon of calm in the chaos. She had stripped off her own formal tunic and was wrapping the smallest child in it. Her movements economical and precise. And she was humming. It was not a human sound. It was a low, subsonic thrum that Orion felt in his teeth more than he heard. A vibration that seemed to push back against the shriek of the alarm. The fledglings, though shivering, were huddled against her, mesmerized by the sound. The Aurelian low hum, a bio-auditory signal of safety. "The console is dead," she called out, her voice tight, not looking up. She had known he would follow. "The manual override is behind that panel, but it's fused shut with ice." Orion saw it. A thick crust of the biofrost had sealed the maintenance panel. He didn't waste time trying to break it. He was already analyzing the pipe. The leak wasn't a crack. It was a full rupture. A cap wouldn't hold. The pressure was in the thousands of pascals. "I can't stop it from here," he yelled over the siren. "I have to divert it." "How?" she yelled back. "The bulkhead doors are sealed. You can't vent it." Orion's eyes scanned the room, his mind in that familiar, terrifying overdrive. The state that was 2 parts genius and 1 part panic. He saw the ruptured cryo line. He saw, 10 feet away, a maintenance plasma conduit used for heavy-duty welding. Hot and cold, fire and ice. "Nova," he said, his voice dropping to a calm command. "I'm going to put you down, right here, with Nurse Saris. You stay with her. You do not move. Understand?" Nova nodded, her face pale. He slid her from his chest and pushed her gently toward Saris. Saris, without missing a beat in her humming, reached out one long, jade-colored arm and pulled Nova into the huddle, shielding her with her own body. "What are you doing?" Saris asked, her eyes fixed on him. "You're a pediatric nurse," Orion said, ripping a sanitation return pipe from the wall. It was flimsy, but it would hold for a few seconds. "I am about to perform a hot clamp and cold shunt. It's not in the manual." He hefted the heavy plasma torch in his other hand. He knew the theory. He had never, ever tried it. If he melted the cryo line, he would vaporize the entire room. If he misaligned the shunt, he would flash freeze the plasma conduit and blow a hole in the hull. He looked at Saris. She was watching him, her gaze unwavering. She trusted him. He looked at Nova, who was peeking at him, her eyes saying, "Fix it. Daddy." He jammed the sanitation pipe against the ruptured cryo line, aiming it toward a subfloor drainage grate. "Hold this!" he yelled. Saris didn't hesitate. She lunged, leaving the children for 1 second, and put all her weight on the shunt pipe, her hands instantly numbing from the cold. "Cover your eyes!" Orion bellowed. He ignited the plasma torch. The room exploded in a white-hot hiss. He wasn't trying to cut. He was trying to weld. He applied the million-degree flame directly to the sub-zero rupture, using the intense thermal shock to create a molten seal around the shunt pipe he and Saris were forcing into the breach. It was like trying to weld a waterfall. The cryofrost fought the plasma, creating a blinding cloud of vapor and ozone. His suit alarms screamed at the temperature differential. "Hold it!" he roared. He laid a thick, molten bead of slag around the pipe joint. It was ugly. It was desperate. But it held. The main spray of cryofluid stopped. The pressure, now contained, blasted through the flimsy sanitation pipe. A geyser of liquid nitrogen that hit the floor grate and vanished into the subdeck. The shriek of the leak was replaced by the low, guttural roar of the redirected fluid. The room was saved. Sarah staggered back, her hands smoking with frostbite. She tucked them under her arms, her face a mask of pain, and immediately returned to the children, resuming her low hum. Orion killed the torch, his own hands shaking. He ran to the main console. He kicked the frozen panel, cracking the ice, and ripped it open. As he'd suspected, the internal wiring was fried, the circuits shattered by a focused electromagnetic pulse. But the bioorganic data core, the living memory of the system, was still there, encased in its nutrient gel. He plugged his personal data slate into a maintenance port. "It's not just a leak," he said, his voice grim as he read the ghost logs. "The bioheat nodes. They didn't fail. They were given a command to shut down. Then the line was ruptured." "What?" Saris looked up, her calm finally breaking. "That's impossible. The safeties are triple redundant." "Not if you have the command codes," Orion said, his fingers flying across his slate. "Someone didn't just break this room. Saris. They murdered it. This was an execution. They shut off the heat. Then they flooded it with cold." The main lights in the creche, which had been flickering, died completely, plunging them into the faint, eerie glow of the emergency strobes. The auxiliary power had failed to engage. The room, no longer actively freezing, was still a deathly cold tomb. The rerouted cryoline was already freezing the subdeck, and the cold was seeping back up. "The shunt won't hold for long," Orion said. "And the life support is offline. The console is slag. I can't reboot it." "We have to move them," Sarah said, her voice strained. She looked at her frostbitten hands. "We have to get them to the medical wing. But the lockdown—" "We can't," Orion said. He looked at the dozen-odd fledglings, then at Nova. "They'll freeze in the corridors before we get 50 feet. We need heat. We need life support. Now." He looked at the wall, at the place where the console had been. Behind the fried circuits, he saw it, the main bundle, the biophoton fibers. They were thick as his arm, a bundle of living, organic wires that connected this room directly to the lattice. They were dark, inert. He knew what to do. It was a violation of every rule. It was a signature. "Daddy," Nova whispered. "It's so cold." "Damn it." He ripped the fried panel completely off the wall. "Saris, watch the door, and keep them humming. I need—" Silence. He stepped up to the bundle of inert fibers. This was not a mechanic's job. A mechanic would splice a wire. This was different. He pulled his multi-tool from his belt, but he didn't use the blade. He used the fine-point, high-frequency emitters. He gently separated a dozen of the hair-thin fibers. They were not glass. They were organic. They bled a tiny, faint light where he touched them. He held them between his bare fingers, ignoring the cold. He closed his eyes. He felt for the pulse, the heartbeat of the lattice. It was faint, occluded by the system crash. He was a core architect. He didn't just fix machines. He healed living systems. His fingers began to move, a complex, high-speed blur. He was not splicing. He was weaving. He was unbraiding the damaged connections and rebraiding them into a new, smaller, functional loop. He was bypassing the console entirely, telling the system that the room's primary node was gone, and forcing it to create a new, auxiliary connection directly from the lattice's spine. It was like performing microscopic brain surgery in the dark. He found the auxiliary power line. He found the environmental control line. He found the bioheat signal. He wove them together, his fingers moving in a pattern he had learned a lifetime ago. He made the final connection. A single, golden pulse of light shot from his fingers, up the fiber, and into the ceiling. With a soft, organic thrum, the lights in the room snapped on, not the harsh red of the alarms, but a warm, golden glow. The bioheat nodes in the alcoves lit up, one by one, pulsing with soft warmth. A gentle, heated breeze kicked in from the ventilators. The room was alive again. Orion slumped against the wall, sweating despite the cold. "You did it!" Nova cried, breaking from the huddle and running to him. "You fixed the light strings. Daddy!" He hugged her tight, burying his face in her hair, his heart hammering. He looked up. Saris was staring at him. Her face was a mask of astonishment, suspicion, and something else. Awe. "That," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "is not standard maintenance procedure. The manual says those fibers are fatal to calibrate without a diagnostic array." Orion forced a shaky grin. "I got lucky. The manual is badly translated. Let's just say I'm good with knots." Before Saris could question him further, the heavy bulkhead doors at the end of the creche hissed open. The alarms finally, mercifully, fell silent. Orion's blood turned to ice. It wasn't the regular palace guard. It wasn't a medical team. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the corridor light, were three figures. They wore armor of polished, ivory-white bioshell, articulated and unnervingly silent. Their helmets were smooth, featureless, mirroring the room back at them. The ivory masks. The Regent's personal guard. His secret police. "This area is now under the direct authority of Regent Malachar Thorn," the lead mask said. His voice was a synthesized, chilling monotone. "The Lacuna event is contained. All civilians will submit to processing." The leader stepped into the room, his white boots crunching on the frost. He surveyed the scene, the weeping children, the ugly, welded pipe, the relit room. His mirrored helm swiveled from Saris to Orion, and finally, to the glowing, rewoven fibers in the wall. "Impressive," the voice synthesized. "The system logs show this entire sector as a catastrophic failure. And yet, it is not." He turned to Saris. "Nurse Anu, your presence is noted. The Regent requires your full, immediate report, and all system logs related to this event." Orion felt a cold dread clamp down on him. The logs, his reweave, it was a signature. It was a digital fingerprint that screamed core architect. "My report will state," Saris said, rising to her full, imposing height, "that the creche's children are safe, thanks to the quick, unorthodox work of this maintenance technician." She stepped partially in front of Orion, shielding him. "The logs, as you can see, are corrupted. The primary console was destroyed in the rupture." The ivory mask leader tilted his head, a gesture that was more predatory than curious. He stared at Orion. A human. The word hung in the air. An accusation. "The only human technician on this station? You will come with us. The Regent wishes to commend you personally." This was it. The end of his hiding. They would scan him. They would find the keymaker code embedded in his DNA. He grabbed Nova, pulling her behind him. "I'm just a mechanic. I just got lucky." "There is no luck in a level 3 breach," the mask replied, taking a step forward. "He will do no such thing." Saris's voice snapped like a whip. It was a new voice, laced with an authority that Orion had not heard. It was cold, sharp, and absolute. The mask paused. "I am Saris Anu, Chief Pediatric Nurse of the Royal Wing. This technician acted under my orders to preserve the lives of Aurelian children. This child," she pointed to Nova, "is a human civilian, and she is in medical shock. You will escort all of us, the children, the technician, and his daughter to the pediatric medical wing for observation. Or, she let the words hang. I will be forced to file a formal complaint with the Empress's own chamberlain that the Regent's Guard obstructed the Wingspread Covenant. The Wingspread Covenant. The most sacred oath in the Empire, the protection of the young above all else. The ivory mask leader stood perfectly still for a long, agonizing moment. His featureless mask stared at Saris. He was calculating. He had orders to secure the scene, to retrieve the data. But causing a public, political incident by threatening a high-level nurse who had just saved the royal fledglings. That was a different risk. Finally, the mask nodded. A sharp, metallic dip of his head. As you wish. Nurse. The children's safety is, of course, the Regent's primary concern. His mirrored gaze found Orion. But be assured, technician, the Regent will have the logs, and he will speak to the human who weaves light. He turned and gestured. Secure the evacuees. The scene is locked. Orion let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He, Saris, and the cluster of children were marched out of the creche, not as heroes, but as evidence. They were taken to Saris's quarters in the pediatric wing. The children were handed off to other nurses, but the ivory mask leader posted 2 of his men outside her door. They were, Saris had explained, under medical quarantine for their protection. It was a comfortable prison. Her quarters were sparse, clean, and smelled of antiseptic and chamomile. Nova, utterly exhausted by the terror and the cold, had fallen asleep on Saris's narrow cot, clutching the drawing she had made in the diner. She is brave, Saris said, placing a thermal blanket over her. Orion sank into the room's single chair. She's all I have. He looked at Saris, who was examining her frostbitten hands under a medical light. You saved us back there. That wingspread thing. It is a real oath, Saris said, her voice tight with pain as she applied a regenerative balm. One Malachar cannot yet afford to be seen breaking. She finished her hands and looked at him, her amber eyes searching. Now, we have maybe 1 hour before that quarantine becomes a formal interrogation. You will tell me who you are. It wasn't a question. I'm a mechanic. Do not, she hissed. Lie to me. Not now. I saw what you did. You didn't just fix a wire. You talked to the lattice. You bypassed a system that is keyed to the Empress's own biosignature. You did it with your bare hands. That is not a mechanic. That is a name I have only read in Forbidden Coalition archives. That is a core architect. Orion's blood ran cold. He said nothing. You're a keymaker, aren't you? She whispered. Before he could answer, his personal comm buzzed. It was not his palace-issued device. It was the one he had built himself, shielded, routed through a dozen dead-end servers. A text-only message, no sender ID, flickered onto the tiny screen. Lacuna is the overture. Tonight, the lattice breaks at the Queen's wing. He's not just aiming for the children. He's aiming for the throne. Orion stared at the words. The casual Queen's wing, confirming his worst fear. He looked up at Saris, his face pale. He held out the comm. She read it. Her face, already pale, turned to marble. They're accelerating, she breathed. He's not waiting. He's going to kill her. Tonight. Orion pressed. You know. This whole time. You knew this was Malachar. Saris looked at her locked door, then back at him. She made a decision. The Empress, she said, her voice dropping so low he had to lean in. Her illness. It is not natural. I am a nurse. I see the data. I've been running my own toxicology screens. It's a bioinhibitor, synthetic, designed to mimic the symptoms of lattice fade, He's poisoning her, Orion whispered. Slowly, carefully, until now. But I saw the reports. I told the royal chamberlain. I thought he was loyal. Ceres's face tightened. He told me I was under stress. He corrected my findings. The next day, my two senior nurses, the ones who co-signed my report, were transferred to a mining outpost on a barren moon. My access to the Empress's personal medical files was revoked. So the Kresh attack, Orion pieced it together. It was a distraction, a test run. And a terror tactic, Ceres added, her voice full of cold fury. To prove the old systems are failing. To show that the Empire needs a strong, new hand. To justify Malachar stabilizing the lattice after the Empress tragically succumbs to her illness. Orion stood up. He looked at Nova, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the coup swirling around them. He had his answer. This was not his fight. This was a nest of vipers, an imperial power struggle that had nothing to do with him. He had one duty. One. I'm out, he said, his voice flat. He began checking Nova's harness. I'm done. I'm sorry about your Empress. I'm sorry Malachar is a monster. But I'm not a keymaker. Not anymore. That man died 3 years ago. I'm just a father. And I'm getting my daughter out of here. Out, Ceres looked stunned. There are ivory masks outside the door. I'm a mechanic, he said, moving to a ventilation grate. I know this station better than they do. There's a duct behind this panel that leads to the old refuse shafts. We can be on a cargo freighter in 20 minutes. Ceres watched him. Her expression, a mixture of desperation and understanding. You're running. I'm protecting her, he shot back, his voice raw. Which is what you should have done. What was your child doing in that creche? Ceres flinched, as if he had struck her. The child I ran for was not mine. It was all of them. I do not have children. Mr. Harlow, I was on a blind date, a foolish one. When I said I would be there with the child, I meant her. She pointed at Nova. I assumed you would leave her with me while you left. I was wrong. Orion paused, his hand on the grate. The words hit him. She hadn't run to save her own. She had run to save everyone's. Daddy. He froze. Nova was awake. She was sitting up, rubbing her eyes, clutching her drawing. It's okay, little star, he said, forcing a smile. Go back to sleep. We're going on a little trip. Nova looked at him. Then at Ceres's grim face. Then at the sealed door. We're running away, she said. It wasn't a question. We're being safe, he corrected. But, my friends, Nova said, her voice small but fierce. In the cold room, they were scared. And the light strings. They're sick. You fix them here. But the message said they're going to get sicker. At the Queen's house. She slid off the cot and walked over to him. Her small face set with a terrifying, simple clarity. Daddy, if you don't fix it, who will save my friends, who will save the Queen? He stared at his daughter. He saw Alara's eyes, Alara's stubborn chin. You ran once. Orion. You ran from the core. You ran here. How far will you run before there's nowhere left? He looked at Ceres, a woman who ran into the fire for children who were not hers. He looked at his daughter, who was asking him to be the man he had promised his dead wife he would never be again. He sank onto the floor, scrubbing his hands over his face. He felt trapped. By his past. By his promise. By his daughter's simple, devastating courage. Okay, he whispered. Okay, little star. We don't run. He stood up, a new, cold resolve in his eyes. He looked at Ceres. All right. You're a nurse. I'm a concerned mechanic. The Regent has an army of ivory masks. What, exactly? Can we do a slow, dangerous spark lit in Saris's amber eyes? We can't stop him with force, but we can stop him with truth. The lattice. It's tied to the Empress, but it's also a record. It's organic. It remembers. The corruption in the Kresh log. It wasn't a deletion. It was a mask. If Malachar is going to break the lattice at the Queen's wing, he has to leave a signature. We just have to be there to record it. We can't get within 1,000 yards of the Queen's wing, Orion countered. It's the most secure place on Aurum, and the masks are already looking for me. We're trapped in this room. We are trapped in the hallway, Saris corrected. She walked to the wall opposite the door. But we don't need the halls. She tapped the wall. Where does this lead? Orion pressed his ear to it. He heard a faint, familiar rumble. The commercial sector, directly above the Twilight Diner. A slow grin spread across his face. Bram. The ventilation duct was tight, filthy, and loud, but as Orion had promised, it bypassed the guards. They dropped into the diner's pantry, landing on sacks of synthetic flour, setting off a cloud of white dust. Bram Tacker didn't even look up from where he was scrubbing a grill. The diner was closed, shielded by level 3 blast doors. The stools all stacked on the tables. Took you long enough, Bram grunted. He tossed a clean towel at Orion. You, and your date, made a mess of the Kresh. I hear. Bram, Orion said, strapping Nova more securely into the harness on his back. I need a favor. You need the back room, don't you? Bram said. It wasn't a question. I figured, the old coalition, I am about to do something stupid and heroic look. You always were a terrible liar, Harlow. You knew. I knew you were more than a grease monkey, Bram said, moving a massive keg of synthale. And I know that look. It's the same look you had right before the core went dark. He heaved the keg aside, revealing a heavy-duty floor grate. He unlocked it and pulled it open. Saris gasped. It was not a sewer. It was not a utility tunnel. It was a vast, dry conduit, and it was glowing. Thick, pulsating bundles of biophoton fibers, the roots of the lattice, lined the walls, stretching off into the darkness. The diner was built on a bet, Bram explained, checking the atmosphere monitor. The palace architects said you couldn't run a commercial kitchen over a primary neural axis. Said the heat, the grease, the waste. It would interfere with the signal. He grinned. I told them my shielding was good enough. Saris stared into the pulsating tunnel. This is the spinal cord of Aurum. Yep, Bram said. He tossed Orion a heavy diagnostic kit and a data auger. And according to the old blueprints, it runs right under the royal wing, straight to the heart of the lattice. You're going to get filthy, and probably killed. And if you're not back in, let's say, 6 hours. I'm blowing the locks and telling everyone the Regent's pet human went psycho and tried to poison the station. You always did know how to cheer a guy up, Bram, Orion said, checking the kit. It was high-end, far too high-end for a diner owner. Just don't break the plumbing, Bram grunted. I'm still on the hook for the lease. Orion nodded. He looked at Saris. You ready for this, nurse? Saris Anu looked into the glowing abyss. Then, at Orion. I am not a nurse, she said, her voice quiet. Not tonight. Tonight. I am a witness. Hold on, little star, Orion whispered, adjusting Nova on his back. It's going to be a bumpy ride. He and Saris descended the ladder, dropping into the humming, organic light of the neural axis. The heavy grate ground shut above them, sealing them in the living, breathing, and vulnerable heart of the machine. The neural axis was not a tunnel. It was an artery. The air was warm, humid, and thrummed with a low, resonant hum, like the inside of a living creature. The walls were not metal, but bundled, pulsating fibers of organic light, the thickness of a man's torso, glowing with a soft, golden energy. It smelled of ozone and damp loam. Nova, secured in the harness on Orion's back, had her face pressed against his shoulder, her breathing the only sound he trusted. Ceres moved ahead of him, her movements economical, silent. She ran her long, jade-colored fingers along the main fiber-optic bundles, not in examination, but as if taking the pulse of the station. "It feels agitated," she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the air. "The rhythm is wrong." Orion had Bram's data auger pressed to the wall. It was a heavy-duty diagnostic tool, and he was using it as a stethoscope. He heard the symphony of the lattice millions of data points, moving in a complex, healthy, interwoven harmony. He heard the climate control for the upper spires, the biorhythms of the hydroponic gardens, the whisper of the gravity stabilizers, and beneath it all, he heard a new sound, a thin, scraping, discordant note. "There," he breathed. He motioned for Ceres to stop. "Listen." He keyed the auger's audio output. A faint, scratching sound filled the air, like a fingernail dragging across crystal. It was hidden, buried deep beneath the station's normal hum. "It's not decay," Orion said, his mind racing. It's language. It's a parasitic code." He plugged his data slate into the auger, tuning the frequency. The screen, dark until now, flickered to life. A cascade of script poured down the display. It was Aurelian. Yes, the archaic, flowing sigils of the High Court. But it was wrong. Woven through it, like a virus, was something else. Something angular, brutal, and efficient. His blood turned to ice. He knew that architecture. "Human Coalition Standard," he whispered, the words feeling like acid on his tongue. "Level gamma encryption, forbidden." "What?" Ceres moved closer, her eyes wide. "Human how?" "This," Orion said, his voice shaking with a cold rage, "is a hybrid." He felt profoundly, personally violated. This was like finding a stranger's handwriting scrawled across his own private thoughts. "Someone has grafted forbidden human attack code onto your lattice. Only a handful of people could even read this. Only one." He stopped. "Only one could have written the human part. But I'm here." This meant someone else from the core had survived, or his work had been stolen. "It's shielded," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "The core command, the purpose of this thing, is locked inside a cascade encryption. I can't break it with this slate. The system will detect the intrusion and wipe the whole node, probably triggering the very attack we're trying to stop." "So we're blind," Ceres said, her posture slumping in defeat. "No," Orion said. "We're not. I can't break it, but I might be able to coax it out." He looked at the thick, pulsating fibers. "The encryption isn't a wall. It's a lock, a combination lock. I have to pluck the individual fibers in the right sequence, at the right resonant frequency, to make it sing its own key. It's like playing a harp in the dark. I need a calibration tool, a high-frequency plectrum." "A what?" "A guitar pick," Orion muttered. He glanced at Nova, asleep on his back. He needed to be quiet. He needed to be fast. He knelt and dumped the contents of Bram's diagnostic kit onto the narrow metal walkway. Out spilled the auger, a set of microdrivers, fiber optic clamps, 3 protein bars, and a heavy-duty synth meat tenderizer. Ceres stared at the mallet. "Bram's definition of diagnostic," she observed, "is broad." "He's a pragmatist," Orion said, his mind already working. He spotted 2 more items, a high-frequency sonic fish scaler and a complex, pressurized wine corkscrew with a geared lever action. He solves problems with the tools he has. He grabbed the fish scaler. The motor. The frequency is perfect, but the head is too broad. It'll pluck the whole bundle. He looked up at Saris. Your medical kit. You're a surgeon. Do you have a bioscalpel, a synaptic one? Model 5 or higher? She hesitated, her hand moving protectively to the pouch on her belt. I have a Model 7 neuroprobe. It's keyed to my biosignature. It is not a tool. It is a medical instrument worth more than this entire diner. Good, Orion said, holding out his hand. Because I'm about to turn it into a guitar pick. She stared at him, her amber eyes searching his. He saw the conflict, the surgeon's pride versus the desperate witness. Finally, with a sigh that was almost a hiss, she slapped the slender, silver instrument into his palm. If you break the alignment, she warned, you will buy me a new one. If this doesn't work, Orion replied, already pulling the microdriver from his kit, none of us will be buying anything, ever again. He worked with a speed that was frantic but precise. He snapped the broad head off the fish scaler, exposing the humming vibration motor. He used a bypass clip from his kit to hotwire the motor to his data slate's power cell. Then, with the delicate touch of a bomb disposal expert, he took the complex, geared handle of the wine corkscrew and mounted the scaler's motor to it. Finally, he mounted Saris's priceless neuroprobe to the motor's tip. It was a monstrosity. A hideous, cobbled-together fusion of high medicine, kitchenware, and a mechanic's grit. He held it up. The light liar. It is, Saris said, her voice faint. The ugliest thing I have ever seen. It's human, Orion countered, powering it on. The neuroprobe tip began to vibrate, so fast it was invisible, emitting a nearly silent, high-frequency thrum. It'll work, Nova stirred on his back, woken by the faint sound. She peered over his shoulder at the strange device. It's a funny harp, Daddy, she whispered. Are you going to play a song? Just one, little star, he said, his voice soft. A very, very quiet one. I need you to be still. He approached the main bundle. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and listened with the auger, finding the dissonant note. He pressed the vibrating tip of the scalpel to the first fiber. A single, pure, golden note of light pulsed from the fiber. He plucked another, and another. He was playing the code, reading the hybrid language, his fingers moving in a complex sequence he hadn't known he remembered. It was tense, delicate work. One wrong note, one slip, and the entire neural axis would crash. He played the final chord of the sequence. The fiber optic bundle in front of him flashed, once, from gold to a deep, sick, ivory white. His data slate, wired to the lyre, chirped. The screen flooded with decrypted text. He read it. Saris read it over his shoulder. Her hand flew to her mouth, her knuckles white. The Ivory Workshop, she breathed, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and vindication. The Ivory Workshop, Malakar's private laboratory. It was him. It gets worse, Orion said, his knuckles white on the grip of his homemade tool. He scrolled down, his stomach clenching. The creche. That was stage 1, a test. To confirm the hybrid code worked, to test our response. Stage 2, he continued, is tonight, in 45 minutes. It's a cascade failure. He's not just cutting the power. He's written a code that mimics the symptoms of the Empress's lattice fade illness. It will sever the biosupport feed, specifically, and only, to the Royal Medical Wing. He's cutting off her air, Saris whispered. And he's framing me, Orion added, his voice a low growl. He pointed to a subfile. It was a prefabricated sensor log, time-stamped and ready to be uploaded to the main palace network. It detailed a catastrophic hardware failure caused by unauthorized, clumsy calibration at the creche's primary node. It listed the system's identification tag for the human technician who performed the bypass. "He's not just killing her," Orion said, the cold fury rising in him. "He's making me the murder weapon." A sudden, sharp red light flashed on his data slate. A proximity alert. "Movement," he hissed, grabbing Saris and pulling her back into the shadows of a junction box. 200 meters, closing fast. "And they're not engineers." He killed the slate's light. The tunnel plunged into near darkness. The only illumination, the soft, ambient pulse of the lattice. They were exposed. There was nowhere to hide. They heard it. The faint, rhythmic shing-shing-shing of articulated, armored boots on the metal walkway. The ivory masks. They were sweeping the neural axis. Orion pushed Saris and Nova flat against the wall, shielding them with his own body. The footsteps grew closer. 100 meters, 50. They were scanning. Orion's wristcom, the private one, buzzed once, silently. He glanced at it. A message from Bram. "Making noise. Stay low." A split second later, the entire neural axis vibrated. A massive, pounding thump of a synthetic bass line shook the dust from the ceiling. It was impossibly, painfully loud. Bram was blasting music through the palace's main comm system, bleeding it into the utility tunnels. The comm in Orion's ear crackled. "Attention Aurum residents." Bram's voice, amplified to distorted levels, roared through the station. "This is the Twilight Diner to celebrate the swift containment of the Lacuna event. Tonight's special is the Regent's Rapture burger synth beef, extra cheese, and a side of asteroid dust fries for the next 15 minutes. Buy one, get one. Absolutely free." The armored footsteps stopped. The masks were confused, their audio sensors completely flooded by the ridiculous, deafening wall of synthwave and commercial shouting. Nova, her face buried in Orion's back, was shaking with silent, terrified giggles. In the relative safety of the noise, Saris looked at Orion. He was completely focused on the proximity sensor, his body a solid shield over his daughter. "You are good at that," she said, her voice raised over the music. "Protecting." "It's all I'm good for," he said bitterly, his eyes on the flashing red icon of the search team, now stalled. "No," she said. "You protect the vulnerable." "The Wingspread Covenant," he said. "You use that in the creche. I thought it was just a saying." "It is our most sacred oath," Saris said, her face illuminated by the pulsing golden light, her expression fierce. "And it is not about the Empress. It is not about the crown. It is about the nest. It commands us to protect the unwinged first, the young, the sick, the future, the crown." Her voice, filled with a frustration that sounded years old. "Only matters if it serves the nest. Malachar protects the crown. He believes the nest is expendable. It is why I clashed with the court. Why I was demoted." The music pounded. The ivory masks, their sensors blinded, their authority mocked by a hamburger advertisement, finally turned and began to retreat, their search pattern broken. The music faded. The silence that returned was heavier, more profound. Orion looked at the hybrid code on his slate. "He couldn't have written the human part alone," he said, his voice quiet. "He had help, from someone at the core." He took a ragged breath. He had to tell her. She had to know what she was standing next to. "Saris, I'm not just a mechanic. Back on Earth, I was a core architect. I led the team that built the Coalition's central lattice, the Keymaker protocols. They're mine. They were supposed to create living worlds, heal planets." He leaned his head back against the cool, humming fibers. Then the war started. A political faction tried to weaponize my work. They wanted to unmake worlds. There was a fire, a system collapse. His voice grew thick. Alara, my wife, she died in that fire. A fire I could have stopped. How? Saris whispered. By using the keymaker, he said, his voice raw. I could have initiated a total system shutdown, a hard reboot. But the system, it was a city, 1,000,000 people. I could have saved her, if I had been willing to sacrifice them. He couldn't finish. Saris looked at him, her amber eyes seeing him for the very first time. Not a mechanic, not just a father. She was seeing a man who had held the kill switch for his own species, and had chosen to lose his own heart instead. You did not fail, Orion, she said, her voice impossibly soft, but firm. You chose the Covenant. You protected the vulnerable, even at the cost of everything you loved. You ran, and now you are here. We are here. He looked at her, gratitude and a deep, aching grief warring in his chest. He took a steadying breath and turned back to the slate. You're right. We're here. And this. He tapped the screen. This is not enough. The logs from the ivory workshop are routed through a dozen proxies. We can't prove Malakar's hand is on the trigger. It's his word against a ghost in his lab. He will be there, Saris insisted, her voice hardening. He is arrogant. He must be seen. He will discover the failure just as it happens. He will try to stop it. He will want to be seen as the hero who failed, despite his best efforts. Yes, Orion said. A slow, cold, and deeply human grin spread across his face. He'll be the hero, just like in the creche. An idea sparked, cold and brilliant. He's expecting the system to break, so let's break it for him. We'll make it play dead. What do you mean? He's planning a cascade failure, a glitch. That's messy. It leaves evidence. We're going to give him something cleaner. We'll use this terminal to simulate a total system crash, a full flatline, the whole wing, dark. But the Empress. For less than a minute, Orion said, his fingers already flying. We'll cut the feed, but we'll hold the charge in the capacitors. The system will look dead, but the life support will have a 60-second buffer. Malakar will rush in. He'll find the system dark. He'll have to use his Regent's Key, his personal, biometric command code to access the deep system and input the real kill command himself. He'll think he's just finishing the job the glitch started. But how do we see that? Saris asked. The logs will be shielded. We'll be just as blind as before. He shields the logs, Orion said, his grin widening. He rummaged in Bram's kit again. But he can't shield the signal. He pulled out the last, and most absurd, of Bram's tools. A wide, perfectly polished, stainless steel spatula. Saris just stared. A cooking utensil. A passive biometric mirror, Orion corrected. He snapped the insulated handle off, leaving just the wide, flat blade. He began to wire it, very carefully, to his data slate. It's non-conductive, non-magnetic. It's just a mirror. The system won't even see it. But when Malakar sends his biosignature, his personal, encrypted command key, this will catch the reflection, every pulse, every keystroke. His digital fingerprint, red-handed. He found the primary bundle leading to the Queen's wing. It was massive, as thick as his own body, the fibers glowing with the Empress's faint life force. He took a deep breath. Hold this. Saris helped him brace the bundle. Carefully, painstakingly, like a surgeon performing an impossible operation. Orion worked the thin, metal spatula blade, deep into the center of the living fiber bundle, until it was completely hidden. He stepped back, connecting his data slate. The screen was black. "It's set," Orion said. "We wait." He makes his move. The system goes dark. He inputs his kill code. The mirror filter records it. And just as his failure becomes permanent, I use the real Keymaker command, and I turn all the lights back on. The tunnel was silent. The only sound was Nova's soft, sleeping breath. "It's midnight," Saris whispered, checking her chronometer. "The shift change at her door. He will do it now." "I know," Orion said. He settled into the darkness, his hand on his homemade light lyre, his eyes on the dark screen of his data slate. "Let's set the stage." The waiting was the loudest thing in the universe. In the humming, golden artery of the neural axis, Orion, Saris, and Nova were frozen. Nova was a warm, small weight on Orion's back, her breath fogging his neck. Saris stood beside him, her jade-colored skin almost translucent in the glow of the lattice, her posture as still as a statue. Orion's eyes were locked on his data slate, the one wired to the hidden spatula mirror. It was dark. Then, it began. It started as a flicker. The ambient, golden light of the tunnel pulsed. Once, twice, like a failing heart. "It's starting," Saris whispered. A second later, a distant, galaxy-wide groan echoed through the station's superstructure. The floor vibrated. Then the alarms hit. Not the localized crash alarm, but a full station, cascading wail. "Lacuna, lacuna. Lattice integrity at 70%. Stability. Failure imminent." On Orion's slate, a new window popped up, fed to him by Bram. It was a security feed from the public, heart of the lattice. The main control center, 2 levels above them. The room was in chaos. Technicians in gold robes were scrambling, their avian features strained with panic. And then, as if summoned by the chaos he had authored, Regent Malachar Thorn swept into the room. He was magnificent. His silver-scaled armor gleamed. His ivory-white cape billowed. His face was a mask of noble, terrible concern. He shoved a panicked technician aside and took his place at the master console. "He's beautiful," Orion muttered, his voice dripping with acid. "Right on cue, the hero." "The lacuna is real," Saris said, her eyes fixed on a different readout on Orion's slate. "The hybrid code is expanding. Look," she pointed. A schematic of the royal wing was flashing red. "The Queen's chamber. Oxygen levels are dropping. Hypoxia in 90 seconds. Malachar was barking orders at the console. Stabilizing the system. A performance for the ages. "He's just managing the decay," Orion said, his fingers poised over his own slate. "He's letting it fail slowly, so his efforts are on record. He's waiting for the system to crash, so he can blame the human." Nova stirred on his back, her small hands gripping his shirt. "Daddy, it's like the cold room again. I'm scared." "It's okay, little star," Orion whispered. He looked at Saris. "He needs a push." He looked back at the feet of Malachar. The regent was glancing at a private chronometer. He was getting impatient. "Now," Orion said. He typed the command, "Simulate cascade failure. Node primary. Target all sensors." The effect was instantaneous. In the neural axis, the golden light of the fibers snapped off. They were plunged into absolute, terrifying darkness. The thrumming, living heartbeat of the tunnel stopped. The alarms, still wailing, sounded thin and hollow in the dead air. On the security feed, the main control room went dark. Every console, every screen, every light died. The technicians cried out, a chorus of terror. Orion's slate, running on its own power, was now their only light. A single, Flashing icon appeared. System offline. Permanent failure detected. You did it, Saris breathed, her hand finding Orion's arm in the dark. They watched the feed. In the pitch-black control room, Malachar Thorne stood still for a count of 3. He had his failure. He had his human scapegoat. Then, a faint, cold, black light illuminated his face from below. He had produced a small, obsidian data key. The Regent's personal override, the Black Key. He plugged it into the dead console. He was no longer the noble hero. His face, lit by the dark light of his key, was a predator's. His lips were pulled back in a snarl of triumph. He was alone, in the dark, with his victim. His fingers began to type. On Orion's main slate, the dark screen wired to the spatula mirror flickered to life. It was no longer black. It was a waterfall of ivory white and poison purple code. Malachar's personal, biometric signature. His unshielded, undeniable command. Bypass life support. Target Royal Wing. Execute final. Signature M. Thorne. Got you, Orion whispered. The word was a prayer of vengeance. Got you. You son of a... The station lurched. The fake crash, coupled with the real, underlying lacuna, was destabilizing the station's gravity. Nova, overwhelmed by the darkness, the noise, and the violent motion, finally broke. She let out a sharp, terrified wail. "Daddy, I want to go home. I want Mama." Orion, his hands locked on the console, couldn't move. "Shh, Nova, shh. Just 2 more seconds." "Orion, she's hyperventilating," Saris said, her voice sharp and professional, cutting through the panic. She unhooked Nova's harness from Orion's back and pulled the trembling child into her own lap, tucking her against her chest, shielding her from the dark. "Nova! Nova, look at me!" Saris commanded, her voice firm but not unkind. Nova's crying subsided into hitched, desperate sobs. "You are safe," Saris said, her amber eyes glowing in the slate light. "We are in the dark, but we are together. I need you to be brave, just for a moment." "Can you do that?" Nova nodded, her small body shaking. "The fledglings in my care," Saris said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "When they are scared, I teach them to breathe, not like a human. I teach them to breathe like an Aurelian. We breathe with our whole bodies, with our wings, even the ones we cannot see. Feel this." Saris placed Nova's small hand on her own chest. She inhaled, a slow, deep, controlled breath that made her whole torso expand. "This is the up wing," she murmured. Then she exhaled, a long, steady sigh. "The down wing. It is a wing beat. It is a rhythm. It is a promise. It means we are alive. Breathe with me, child. Up wing and down wing." Orion watched, his heart aching, as his daughter, his terrified, human daughter, pressed her face against the chest of this alien woman. He watched Nova's small shoulders rise and fall, her sobs quieting as she matched Saris's rhythm. Up wing and down wing, in the humming darkness, surrounded by the machinery of a coup, a family was being forged, not of blood, but of choice, of breath. Orion looked from them, this impossible picture of comfort, back to the screen. Malachar had just typed the final execution command. "He's done," Orion said, his voice hard as diamond. "He's killed her." He copied the mirrored log. He encrypted it and sent it, with a single word, to Bram. "Now." Then, he turned to his own console. His hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. From a terrible, righteous power he had kept chained for 3 long years. "What are you doing?" Saris asked, her arms still locked around Nova. "He thinks he's a god," Orion said. "He thinks he can turn off the light, He placed his hands on the console, but he didn't type. He closed his eyes. He's forgotten what a real god feels like. He's forgotten what a human can do when he's cornered. He let go. He let the keymaker, the command code embedded in his very DNA, rise up. It was not a program. It was not code. It was a feeling. It was the feeling of connection, of understanding every single fiber, every node, every pulse of light in the entire system, as if it were a nerve ending in his own body. It was the language of creation. He reached into the dark, dead system. He found the dying embers of the Queen's life support. He found the severed, corrupted connections of Malakar's code. He found the panic and the chaos. And he pulled. He wove. He did not fix the lattice. He remade it. He tore out the hybrid code, the virus, the decay, with his digital hands. He took the failing pulse of the Queen's chamber, and he amplified it, weaving a new, shining, impossibly strong bridge of light to connect it back to the whole. He was Orion Harlow. He was a keymaker, and he was bringing the dawn, outside the tunnel, on the orbital palace of Aurum. The night exploded. Every light, every console, every viewport that had been dark, suddenly, instantaneously, blazed with pure, golden light. The alarm stopped. The wailing died, replaced by a single, triumphant, harmonic chime that vibrated through the entire station. The lattice was not just back. It was brighter. It was cleaner. It was healed. In the main control room, Malakar Thorn was blinded. He staggered back, his black key still in the console, as every screen around him lit up. Not with sensor readings, but with one thing: his own code, his own signature. Execute final. Signature M. Thorn. Bram was not just a diner owner. He was an information warrior. He had taken Orion's file and, bypassing the palace sensors, had broadcast it on every channel, every screen, every commercial billboard on the station, the anti-censorship channels of the Merchants Guild, in the control room, the ivory masks, the technicians, the entire palace staff, stared, frozen, at the screen, at the proof, at the regent, who was no longer a hero, but a regicide. Malakar stared at his own damnation, his face a mask of incandescent fury. He saw the feed of Orion's human identification tag, displayed right next to the code. He had been played by a human. He let out a roar that was not avian, not draconic, but purely, primally animal. He slammed his armored fist on a protected panel on the console. A red panel, he bellowed. Iron Tooth, if I cannot have the crown, I will have ashes. Orion, in the tunnel, saw the command flash across his slate. Iron Tooth Protocol. What is that? What's Iron Tooth? It's a myth, Ceres said, her face pale. A scorched earth protocol. To destroy evidence. What evidence? Orion yelled. He's already exposed, she screamed. The ivory workshop. His lab, it's... She was cut off by the world ending. The main fiber optic bundle, the one Orion had his mirror in, tore apart in a shower of molten glass and organic fluid. A superheated maintenance pipe, ruptured by the blast, exploded. A wall of blinding, scalding steam and fire blasted into the tunnel. Orion, Ceres screamed, shielding Nova with her body as the walkway they were on collapsed. Orion grabbed them, his architect's mind instantly mapping the failure. The explosion had breached the main reactor shielding. This whole axis wasn't just collapsing, it was vaporizing. This way, he roared, pulling them toward a small, reinforced thermal vent shaft he had used for maintenance. He shoved the grate open. It's a heat pipe, but it leads to the lower levels. It's our only way out. He looked at his slate. The Queen's chamber was a mass of red. The blast had severed the physical life support. His keymaker fix was useless. The lattice was healed. But the pipes were broken. "The buffer's gone," he said, his voice flat with horror. "The explosion. She's suffocating. For real, this time. I can't fix it from here." He turned to Saris, grabbing her arm. "We have to go. Now, Nova." But Saris was not moving. She was looking, not at the escape route, but up. Up the collapsed, burning gantry, toward the inferno that led to the royal wing. "I can't," she said. Her voice was quiet, terribly calm. "Saris, it's a firestorm, there's no air. You'll die in seconds." "I am a nurse," she said, her amber eyes locking on his. They were filled with an agonizing, impossible choice. "I protect the nest. You are a father. You protect yours." "Don't be a fool," he yelled, pulling at her. "It's over." "No." She pulled her arm from his grasp. She looked at Nova, at this child she had held and breathed with. She touched Nova's cheek, a gesture of profound, heartbreaking farewell. "The covenant, the young first, you and her, you are the future." She turned from him. "Go live, Orion Harlow." "Cirrus." But she was already climbing, scrambling up the burning wreckage, disappearing into the wall of steam and fire, ascending into hell to give one last breath to her queen. Orion stood frozen, his heart ripping in two. He had found something, someone, in this mess, and he was losing her. "Daddy!" Nova screamed, the heat scorching her face. "Daddy, the fire!" The choice was made for him. It was always the same choice. He grabbed his daughter, shoved her into the thermal pipe, and plunged in after her, sealing the hatch just as the neural axis behind them dissolved into white, cleansing flame. "I will stay," he heard Saris's voice in his head. Or maybe, over the roar of the fire, he had heard her scream it. The thermal pipe was a chute of screaming metal. Orion held Nova tight against his chest, his own body taking the bruising impact as they tumbled down the emergency vent. The roar of the firestorm in the neural axis above them, a fading, visceral thunder. They were ejected, covered in soot and scalding water, onto a grated deck in the station's industrial underbelly. The air here was cold, smelling of lubricating oil and recycled ozone. The entire station groaned around them, a deep, structural agony. The explosion had been a mortal wound. Orion's first thought was of Saris. A black, crushing weight settled in his chest, colder than the metal deck. She had stayed. She had climbed into the fire, to buy a dying woman a few more breaths. He had run. Again. He had saved his child. But the guilt felt identical. "I will stay." Her last words. A promise. An epitaph. He checked Nova, his hands shaking. She was terrified, soaked, but unharmed. "It's okay, little star. We're okay." "She's gone," Nova whispered, her small, soot-stained face pale with a comprehension that was far too old for her. "The nurse lady, she's gone, like Mama." Orion's throat closed. He had no answer. He hauled his daughter to her feet. "We have to move. We have to get to Bram. He'll keep us safe." He started running, following the emergency light arrows toward the commercial sectors. But his private comm, the one he had built, buzzed with a priority alert. It wasn't from Bram. It was from the station's central core. A raw data feed he had no business receiving. A station-wide alert, unbroadcast, unfiltered. Regent M, Thorn, Eva, Sector Omega. Target external pressure. Jai. Orion stopped dead. The pressure Jai. The primary stabilization hub for the entire station. It wasn't a control room. It was a dead man's switch. Malachar wasn't fleeing. He was going to finish the job. He was going to vent the station's core pressure, tear the orbital palace from the sky, and send it tumbling into the planet below. A final, spiteful act of oblivion. He's going to break it all, Orion breathed. He looked down the corridor, toward safety, toward Bram. He thought of Saris, a silhouette against the fire. Daddy, Nova's voice was small, but it was not the voice of the child who had cried in the dark. It was the voice of the girl who had breathed with an Aurelian. You fixed the lights, but the house is still falling. We can't let him break it all. She stayed. Orion looked at his daughter. He saw Alara's steel. He saw Saris's resolve. He had run from the core to protect this child, and now she was telling him to stop. He made a different choice. He ran, not toward the diner, but toward the nearest emergency EVA locker. Hold on, little star, he said, his voice a low growl. The kettle's about to boil over. He found the locker. He suited up in a heavy-duty engineering vac suit. He found a child's emergency suit, sealing Nova into it, her wide, dark eyes staring at him through the visor. He tethered her, short and tight, to the utility harness on his own chest. He grabbed his toolkit. He didn't need a weapon. He was a mechanic. He had tools. He borrowed a maintenance skiff, a one-man, open cockpit sled. He blew the magnetic clamps and shot into the station's chaotic, damaged transport network, rocketing toward the outer hull. The external pressure. Jai was a lonely, skeletal platform clinging to the station's outermost ring. It was a place of stark, terrible beauty. Below. The planet Aurelia was a swirling marble of blue and gold. Above, the stars were sharp, unblinking diamonds. The platform itself was glazed in a thin layer of crystalline ice from a ruptured coolant line. Malachar was there. His magnificent silver armor was blackened, scorched. One shoulder pauldron melted slag from the explosion. He was at the main console, his one good hand flying across the holographic controls, overriding the safeties. Orion's skiff slammed onto the platform, skidding on the ice. He cut the power. The sudden, absolute silence of the void was deafening. Malachar turned. His helmet was off. His aristocratic, hawk-like face was smeared with soot. His silver scales flaked with blood. He saw Orion, and the human child tethered to his chest. He laughed, a dry, rasping, insane sound that had no air to carry it, but which Orion heard, sharp and clear, over the private suit-to-suit comm. The human, Malachar's voice, was a venomous rasp. The little grease monkey, the plumber. You cost me everything. It's over, Malachar, Orion said, stepping onto the platform. He felt Nova's small, gloved hands grip his suit. The Council has the proof. Proof, Malachar spat. Proof is irrelevant when you are atoms. This is the difference between your weak, pathetic species and mine, human. You fix, you mend. But breaking is always stronger. It only takes 1 second to undo 1,000 years of work. He lunged, even damaged. His armored strength was terrifying. He backhanded Orion, a casual, brutal blow that sent him flying. Orion slammed into a bulkhead, his helmet cracking against the metal. His suit integrity alarm shrieked. Warning! Microfracture detected. Orion gasped, the breath driven from his lungs. Malachar was toying with him, stalking him across the icy platform. Weak, Malachar hissed, advancing. Your bones are hollow. Your skin is soft. You are mud, trying to wrestle a dragon. Orion, gasping for air, pushed himself up. He saw it. He was a mechanic. He saw flaws. Malachar's armor, the left side, had been damaged in his own explosion. Near the primary servo on his shoulder, the one that powered his good arm, was a small, hairline fracture in the bioshell. A tiny, insignificant flaw. You're right, Orion panted, his voice echoing in his helmet. He got to his feet. He pulled a tool from his belt. Not a weapon. A simple, heavy, industrial pressure wrench. I am weak, but I know things you don't. And what is that, plumber? Malachar sneered, raising his armored fist for the killing blow. The kettle lesson, Orion said. He moved. He didn't try to meet the blow. He ducked under it. A desperate, rolling dive on the ice, coming up inside the Regent's guard. You can have a tank made of 10-inch steel, he grunted. Positioning himself, Malachar roared, bringing his arm back for another strike. But you apply enough pressure. Orion jammed the head of the heavy wrench deep into the hairline fracture on the shoulder servo. One tiny, little flaw. He twisted. It was not about strength. It was about physics. It was about leverage. The immense, pressurized power of the servo, fighting to move, met the focused, unyielding torque of a simple human tool. With a sickening, silent pop, the armor plate shattered. The servo, its housing compromised, exploded in a shower of sparks and pressurized hydraulic fluid. The arm went dead. Malachar screamed, a choked, agonizing sound, as he staggered back, clutching the ruined, sparking limb. He was down, beaten. Orion stood over him. The wrench held like a club, his breath ragged. His visor reflected the cold, distant starlight. He saw Alara's face in the flames of the core. He saw Saris, her hand raised in farewell as she walked into the steam. This was the moment, for vengeance, for blood. Do it, Malachar spat, glaring up at him, his suit sealing the breach in his arm. Show me the animal you really are. Prove me right. Orion raised the wrench. He looked at the regent. This monster who had murdered children, poisoned his queen, and tried to kill them all. Then he looked at Nova, tethered to his chest, watching him with wide, trusting eyes. He lowered the wrench. No, Orion said, his voice flat. Revenge isn't the point. You're just a broken part. I don't kill. I fix. He turned his back on the fallen regent and walked to the pressure console. He didn't just access it. He owned it. He plunged his data slate into the port, his keymaker protocols flooding the system. He seized control of the station's external camera network. He overrode the palace's emergency broadcast system. He forced a connection, a bridge of light, a hard line, unblockable broadcast, directly to the Palace High Council, who were just at that moment emerging, stunned and confused, from their emergency bunkers. Their faces appeared on his holographic screen, shocked, imperial. High Council, Orion said, his voice ragged, broadcasting to the entire station. The camera zoomed in on Malachar, broken, beaten, his armor shattered. Here is your traitor. The human error was his. He broadcast the mirrored log, the black key, the kill command, Malachar, defeated, exposed, let out a choked, insane laugh. You think you've won. You think this is over. His one good hand, the one not shattered, snaked to a hidden panel on his suit. He slammed it. The dead man's switch, human. I've linked the reactor core to the lattice. The lattice you so beautifully healed. A new holographic timer appeared on the console, counting down 5 minutes. When this timer hits 0, Malachar cackled, the lattice will execute one final command, my command. It will detonate the reactor Iron Tooth if I cannot have the Empire. No one will. A self-destruct. Orion scrambled for the console. It was locked. He tried to break it, but it wasn't a simple code. A screen popped up. Bio-organic lock. Rhythm key sequence required. It's a 3-part harmony, Orion whispered in horror, reading the schematic. A protocol to prevent this. It needs 3 simultaneous, perfectly synchronized inputs to disarm. An Aurelian high-frequency pulse, a human mid-range vocalization, and a mechanical resonance. It's impossible. It's a song. We're going to die, he said, slumping against the console. His comm crackled, a hiss, a faint, gasping, agonizing sound. Orion. His heart stopped. Saris, you're alive. Barely. Her voice was a reedy, smoke-damaged whisper. The Queen's chamber. Fire is out. The guard. They found me. She is weak, but breathing. I did it. Orion. I stayed. Saris, I need you, he said, his voice desperate, his fingers flying across the console, trying to route her signal. Malakar's last play. It's a rhythm lock. It's going to blow the station. I need an Aurelian pulse. A high-frequency wing beat. Can you tap on your comm? Just tap. There was a long pause. He heard a choked cough. Then, tap, 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 tap. Faint. Weak. But it was there. I have you, he yelled, locking her signal. Nova, little star, I need you. I need you to sing. A single note. As clear and as steady as you can. Right into your helmet comm. Can you do that for me? Nova, suspended in the void, looked at the timer. 4 minutes. She looked at her father. She nodded, her small face set. She took a breath and sang, a pure, clear, unwavering child's note that cut through the silence of space. I have you both, Orion said, his own voice thick with tears. Now, the mechanical part. He pulled out his light lyre, the ridiculous, beautiful tool he had built from kitchen parts and medical tech. He jammed its vibrating neuroprobe tip against the console's exposed data port. Okay, he said, his voice a prayer. Saris, on my count. Keep the rhythm. Nova, hold that note. 1, 2, 3. Tap. Tap, tap. Tap. Ah, zuzzed. The console flashed red. Sequence misaligned. Harmonic imbalance. The timer jumped, accelerating. 3 minutes. It's not working, Orion yelled, his hands shaking. The harmony. It's off, Saris. Your rhythm. It's fading. I can't. Saris gasped over the comm. Orion, the smoke. I'm so tired. Her tapping faltered. Tap, tap, tap. Saris, stay with us, he begged. Mommy, Nova whispered, her own note failing. She looked at the complex, broken console. Mommy used to say, her voice strengthened. She said, fixing anything is a way of healing. You're healing, Saris. You have to heal. Breathe up wing, down wing. There was a strangled sob over the comm, then a deep, ragged intake of air. Healing! Saris's voice came back, a raw whisper of pure, unadulterated will. The tapping returned, not weak, strong. Tap, 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 tap. Steady. On the beat? Nova took a deep breath, her eyes locked on the timer, and sang, her note soaring, pure and true. Orion gritted his teeth, his hands steady on the lyre, and plucked the final, resonant chord. The 3 sounds locked. A new, golden, harmonic chime echoed through the comms. The console flashed green. The timer stopped at 2 minutes and 3 seconds. System stable. Iron Tooth protocol disarmed. On the holographic screen, the doors to the Palace High Council chamber burst open. Royal guards, not ivory masks, but the blue and gold of the Empress's true guard, stormed the room. Their weapons raised, not at Orion, but at the screen showing Malakar. They were getting reports from all over. The broadcast had worked. On the pressure Jai. 2 of the same guards appeared from an access hatch. Their plasma rifles trained on the fallen regent. "He's all yours," Orion said. He slumped against the console, his legs giving out. He stood there, tethered to his daughter, the stars cold and silent. He had won. He was a hero. But he felt empty. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the profound, hollow ache of his grief. Alara. He had run from the core. Saris. She had run into the fire. He was the one who was always left behind. His comm crackled. Orion. Saris's voice, stronger. She was breathing easier. They're taking me to the medical bay. The Queen. She is stable. She's breathing. He looked at his gloved hands, covered in grease and hydraulic fluid. "I'm glad you stayed, Saris," he said, his voice thick. "I'm glad you did too," she replied. He looked out at the void. He had spent 3 years running from his past, from the man he was, and here, in the cold, endless night, he finally had a reason to stop, a reason to stand his ground. Back inside the station, it was controlled chaos. Malachar, silent and glaring, was being dragged away in magnetic cuffs. Orion, wrapped in a thermal blanket with Nova on his lap, watched him go. He wanted to fade. He wanted to go back to his workshop, lock the door, and disappear. He had done his part. He was done. A medical officer approached, her face grim. "Mr. Harlow, the Lady Saris has requested your presence in the medical wing. She is asking for you, and the High Council will want to speak with you." Orion flinched. The Council, the authorities, the questions. He shook his head. "No, just tell Saris. I'm glad she's okay." He started to stand, to find the quietest, darkest corridor and vanish. "Daddy," Nova said, looking up at him. Her face was still streaked with soot, but her eyes were clear. "We can't go. Not without her." She held up her drawing, the one from the diner. It was crumpled, soaked, and smeared, but the 3 figures were still visible. Him, her, and the winged woman. "She's part of the song," Nova said simply. Orion looked at his daughter. He looked at the medical officer. He looked at the drawing. He let out a ragged, exhausted sigh that was half a sob. He stood up, lifting Nova onto his hip. "All right," he said. "Lead the way." He wasn't running. Not this time. The medical bay was antiseptic, white, and silent. It was the antithesis of the Twilight Diner. Orion stood awkwardly in the doorway, his hands scrubbed raw but still feeling greasy, the smell of ozone permanently etched into his clothes. Nova clung to his leg, her small face scrubbed clean, her eyes wide with awe and apprehension. Saris was not in a biobed. She was sitting on the edge of one, directing 2 harried medical officers. Her voice, still a raw, smoky rasp, but infused with the unmistakable iron of command. Her hands were heavily bandaged in white regeneration gel. Her teal and bronze wings, usually so tightly bound, were slightly unfurled, their edges singed. She looked exhausted, magnificent, and terrifyingly alive. She saw him. Her professional mask softened. Just a fraction. "Mr. Harlow," she rasped. "You came." "You asked," he said simply. Before she could reply, 2 of the Empress's blue and gold royal guard entered the room. They were not the ivory masks. Their armor was ancient, ceremonial, and they moved with a gravity that Malachar's thugs had lacked. "The architect," the lead guard announced, his voice a respectful baritone. "The High Council will see you now." Orion's stomach turned to lead. He looked at Saris, a flicker of his old panic returning. "Council," Saris gave him a small, tired nod. "You fixed their world. Orion. They want to give it to you. Go. And she looked at Nova. Take her. They should see what you were fighting for. The High Council chamber was a vast, circular room at the apex of the station. The ceiling was a transparent dome of crystal, looking out not at the planet, but at the raw, endless starfield. The floor was a living map of the biophoton lattice, pulsing with the new, steady, golden light he had given it. 12 Aurelian High Lords, draped in robes that shimmered like captured nebulae, sat in a high-backed crescent, their hawk-like faces impassive. Orion stood in the center, a small, soot-stained human in borrowed mechanics overalls, holding his daughter's hand. He felt like a microbe under a microscope. Architect Orion Harlow, the eldest of the council, a female with plumage like polished snow, spoke. Her voice was like the chiming of glass. You have, by an act of profound and terrifying skill, saved Aurum. You have unmade a traitor. You have rewoven the lattice. You have revealed yourself as a keymaker. Orion flinched at the word. It felt like an accusation. Malachar Thorne's treachery, the counselor continued, has left a vacuum. The lattice is stable, but it is vulnerable. It requires a hand of impossible skill to guide it. She made a gesture. A guard approached Orion, bearing a velvet cushion. On it rested not a crown, but a seal of resonance, a heavy, golden disc, intricately carved. The High Council offers you the regency of the lattice, the High Lord said. You will be given rank, title, and absolute authority over the living infrastructure of the Aurelian Empire. You will answer to no one save the Empress herself. Take the seal. Architect, take the power you have earned. This was it. This was his nightmare. He was not in a stateroom. He was back at the core, the flames leaping, the alarm screaming. He saw Alara's face, her hand outstretched, her mouth forming his name. Power. The power he had refused to use. The power that had cost him everything. He looked at the golden disc. He saw a weapon. He saw a throne. He saw a prison. No, he whispered. The council members stiffened. You refuse. Orion took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked at the vast, complex, living map beneath his feet. He looked at Nova, who was staring at the lights, not the Lords. He felt the phantom weight of Alara's hand on his shoulder. I refuse the seal, he said, his voice stronger. He looked up, not at the council, but at the stars. I am not a lord. I am not a regent. He looked back at them, his eyes holding the gaze of the eldest. I am a mechanic and a father. Your system broke because power was held by one hand. You are trying to solve that problem by giving it to another hand. You are just replacing the part. You are not fixing the machine. What? What are you proposing? Human, a different, more belligerent lord demanded. Democracy, Orion said. Infrastructure is not a right of the crown. It is the lifeblood of the people. The creche froze because no one knew how to fix it but me. And I was hiding. He pointed not to the seal, but to the glowing map. I will not be your regent, but I will be your teacher. I will not take your throne. But you will give me Malachar's lab. The council murmured, shocked. The ivory workshop, Orion pressed on, his voice ringing with a conviction he had not felt in years. You will dismantle it, and in its place, we will build a school, an academy of light, or whatever you want to call it. I will teach your engineers. I will teach your children. I will teach anyone Aurelian, human, any species that comes here, how to read the lattice, how to heal it, how to maintain it. I am giving you back your power. By giving it to all of you. You do not need a keymaker. You need 1,000, 10,000. Good plumbers. He was panting, his heart hammering. He had, he realized, just declared war on their entire feudal system. The High Council chamber was utterly silent. The High Lord stared at him. The snow-white elder looked at him for a long, long time. He saw her eyes drift down to Nova, who was quietly tracing one of the light lines on the floor with her finger. "This is unprecedented," the elder said. "So was tonight," Orion replied. The elder looked at her counsel. "He asks for no power, only to give it away. He asks for no gold, only for a classroom." She looked back at Orion, and for the first time, he saw something human in her ancient, avian eyes. "The Academy of Light, it will be done. You have your school, architect. May the stars help us all." The Twilight Diner, 2 days later, was unrecognizable. It was, and always would be, a greasy spoon. But it was now also the unofficial, chaotic, and functional heart of the station's recovery. Bram was behind the bar, not just flipping burgers, but coordinating supply runs on 3 different comm channels. His asteroid dust spice shaker, sitting next to a high-level router. The back booths, the ones with the best light, had been commandeered by Ceres. The Royal Pediatric Wing was still a biohazard zone, so she had, with imperial authority, declared the diner a provisional pediatric triage center. The tables were covered in sterile cloths, medical scanners, and juice boxes. Ceres, her hands now in lighter, flexible support bandages, was examining a small, downy-winged fledgling, her smoky voice gentle but firm. "And what did we learn, little one?" she was saying. "We do not poke the hot steam vent." Correct. And at the next booth, sitting cross-legged on the vinyl seat, was Nova. She had a data pad. She was meticulously writing down the fledgling's name, his symptoms, and a small, hand-drawn picture of a frowny face. "Nova Harlow," Ceres said, not looking up. "You are my junior aide. Your job is to document. A healer is only as good as her notes." "Yes, Nurse Ceres," Nova said, her face a mask of profound, 7-year-old seriousness. Orion watched from the kitchen. He was elbows deep in the diner's primary water recycler, a tool in one hand, a synth meat spatula in the other. Standing next to him was a young Aurelian engineer, her golden robes tucked into her belt, her expression baffled. "But architect," the apprentice said, "the manual states that a resonant frequency leak can only be sealed with a molecular clamp. We do not have one." "The manual," Orion said, not looking up, "was written by someone who never had to fix a toilet at 3 in the morning. Forget the clamp. Feel the vibration." He handed her the spatula. "You're not trying to stop the vibration. You're trying to change its key. You need to dampen the harmonic, not fight it. Here, press this. Here. See, you're not breaking the door down. You're just jiggling the lock." The apprentice pressed the spatula to the pipe. The high-pitched, agonizing squeal dropped, settled, and disappeared. Her eyes went wide. It is quiet." "Now you can patch it," Orion said, grabbing a protein bar. "Human engineering. Half physics. Half... I guess this will work. Now you try." A week passed. The station, and its people, began to heal. The name for the incident had spread the dawn in glass. It was the night the lattice died, and was reborn brighter. And they had a new hero. It was not Orion. The human architect remained a shadowy, slightly terrifying figure. The man who spoke to the machine. The hero of Aurum. The one the public broadcasters toasted. Was Ceres. They called her the Breathkeeper. She was the one who had stayed. She had walked into the fire to give breath to the queen. She had faced down the ivory masks to protect the children. She was the living embodiment of the covenant. Banners of teal and bronze, her wing colors, hung from the commercial spires. She hated it. "It is ridiculous," she rasped, late one night. The diner was finally quiet. The last patient was asleep. Nova was curled up in a booth, her datapad clutched to her chest. Orion was pouring 2 mugs of thick, black coffee. "You are a public figure," Orion said, sliding a mug to her. He winced. Her hands were still stiff. He gently curled her bandaged fingers around the warm ceramic. "Get used to it." "I am a nurse," she insisted, breathing in the steam. "I am maintenance. Like you. We just fix what is broken." "Speaking of," Orion said, sitting opposite her. He pushed a data slate across the table. Bram intercepted this. It is a log of all of Malakar's off-station communications for the last 6 months. Saris picked it up. She scrolled. Her face, already weary, darkened. "Lords, senators, military leaders. This is half the court." "They've been making arrests all week," Orion said quietly. "Your broadcast, my mirror log. It was the key. They are rolling up his entire network of traitors. The ones who looked the other way. The ones who wanted a stronger hand." "The ones," Sarah said, her voice like ice, "who helped him poison his queen." Orion watched her. She was powerful. This woman who had faced fire. But he saw the exhaustion in the lines around her eyes. He saw the weight of the power she did have. He looked at his own hands, clean for once. He remembered the feeling. The godlike, terrifying rush of the Keymaker protocol. The feeling of absolute control. "It felt good," he whispered, so quietly he thought she might not hear. "What did," she asked, looking up from the slate. "In the tunnel, when I took the lattice back, and on the platform, with Malakar." He met her eyes. "It felt powerful. Using the key. It felt right. And it scares me to death. Saris." He leaned forward, his voice raw. "Alara, my wife. She died because I was afraid of that power. Because I froze. I saw what it could do. What it did to the people who built it at the core. It corrupted them. It made them think they were gods." He scrubbed his face. "How do I know? How do I know I am not just him? Just Malakar. But with a different..." "Excuse me." Saris was silent for a long moment. She reached across the table, her bandaged, stiff fingers touching the back of his hand. It was not a romantic gesture. It was an anchor. "The wing-spread covenant," she said, her voice soft but unbreakable. "It is my oath, Orion, and it is now yours." "I am not Aurelian," he said. "It is not about blood," she countered. "It is about choice. The covenant commands us to protect the nest before the crown. The young, the vulnerable, the future." She tapped his chest with one bandaged finger. Malakar's power was for the crown, for the throne, for himself. He would sacrifice the nest, the creche, to get it. You, architect, you faced the same choice. You could have saved your station, your queen, and let your daughter be taken by the masks. You could have pursued Malakar and left Nova in the burning tunnel. You did not. You held onto the nest. You always protected the nest. She leaned in, her amber eyes holding his. "That is the difference. Orion, power is not the poison. The purpose is, you are not him. You are a father." He held her gaze. He felt the knot of fear in his chest, the one he had carried for 3 years, 7 months, and 29 days. Finally, begin to ease. "Daddy!" They both turned. Nova was awake, rubbing her eyes, her hair a wild mess. She slid out of the booth and walked over to them. She looked at Orion, then at Saris. She looked at Orion's hand, still under Ceres's on the table. She tilted her head, her expression one of simple, childish logistics. "Daddy," she asked, her voice sleepy, "are we a family? Now with Nurse Ceres?" Orion froze. The coffee mug in his hand stopped halfway to his lips. He looked at Nova. He looked at Ceres. He felt a sudden, illogical surge of panic that was 10 times more terrifying than facing Malachar. He did not know the answer. To say yes felt like a betrayal. To say no felt like a lie. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He was the keymaker, the man who had rewoven a world, and he was rendered mute by a 7-year-old. Ceres smiled. It was not her professional, calming smile. It was not her tired, warrior's smile. It was a new, small, and profoundly genuine smile, one that lit her eyes from within. She did not answer. She just reached out, brushing the sleep from Nova's hair. "It is late, Junior Aide," Ceres rasped gently. "A healer needs her rest." The question hung in the warm, greasy air of the diner, unanswered, but not rejected. A chime broke the spell. A royal guard, in the blue and gold, was standing at the diner entrance. He was holding a formal, scrolled data slate. "Architect Harlow, Lady Ceres, Aide Nova," he said, bowing to all 3 of them, which made Nova gasp. "A summons. The Queen's restoration ceremony is tomorrow at high sun. Her Majesty," he paused, "is awake. She has requested your presence." Orion stood up. "I do not understand. I am just the mechanic. We have work to do here." Ceres was already standing, her face composed, but her eyes were strange. She looked suddenly vulnerable. "We must go. Orion," she said. "Why?" he asked. "Why us the trial? The celebration? It is not our place." Ceres looked at him, then at Nova. She took a deep breath, her bandaged hands clasping in front of her. "Because the healing is not finished," she said, her voice heavy with a meaning he could not understand. "Malachar is in chains. The lattice is bright. But the truth has not yet been spoken. You must be there, both of you. You must be there, for the truth." The throne room of Aurum was not a room of gold, but of light. The walls were living crystal, the ceiling a transparent dome that looked upon the healed, vibrant blue of the planet below. The floor was the lattice map, its golden pathways steady, strong, and bright. It was not a coronation. It was a restoration. Orion stood near the back, his hands clasped behind his back, feeling profoundly, painfully out of place. He wore a clean, borrowed tunic. It was gray. It was the only color he felt comfortable in. He had scrubbed his fingernails for 20 minutes, but he still felt the phantom stain of grease. Nova stood beside him, clutching his hand, her other hand holding her crumpled, water-damaged drawing from the diner. She was wearing her good shoes. The High Council was assembled, their robes of state casting iridescent shadows on the glowing floor. The blue and gold royal guard lined the walls, their faces solemn. All eyes were on the center of the room. There stood a large, crystalline, teardrop-shaped chamber, the Empress's restoration pod. It was opaque, pulsing with a soft, white, healing light. For a week, the station had been told. The Queen had been healing within it, her body and her connection to the lattice being purged of Malachar's final, desperate poisons. A chime echoed, pure and single. The hall fell into a profound hush. "Her Majesty," the snow-white elder of the council announced, her voice trembling. "The Queen lives." The light in the pod faded. The air hissed as the seals broke. The crystalline front dissolved, receding like liquid glass. The council knelt as one. "Majesty," they chorused. Orion craned his neck, looking for the grand entrance, the procession. He was waiting for a stranger, a resplendent, mythical figure draped in jewels. He was also, desperately, scanning the assembled crowd for Ceres. She had been summoned hours before him. He felt exposed without her, his anchor in this sea of ritual. He wanted to stand beside her. A figure stepped from the pod. She was tall, and her wings, no longer singed, no longer bound, unfurled to their full, magnificent breadth. They were a cascade of teal and bronze, so vibrant they seemed to capture the light of the planet below. She was not wearing armor. She was not wearing jewels. She wore a simple, flowing robe of pure white, and her long, jade-colored hands were bare, the bandages gone. She was familiar. "Nurse Ceres," Nova whispered, her voice a small, confused sound in the vast, silent hall. Orion's heart stopped. His brain tried, and failed, to process the data. It was Ceres. It was the woman from the diner, the nurse from the creche, the warrior from the tunnel. She was standing where the queen should be. He took a step forward. "Ceres, what's going on? Are you all right?" The elder of the High Council rose, her face a mask of awe. "Architect Orion Harlow," she boomed, her voice sharp with shock. "You will kneel. You are in the presence of her most radiant majesty. Queen Ceres Anu, sovereign of the Aurelian Empire, keeper of the lattice." The world tilted. The sounds of the room, the humming, the breathing, faded to a dull roar in Orion's ears. He stared. The woman in the center of the room, the queen, turned her head. She looked at him, and it was Ceres. It was her face, her amber eyes. But the weariness was gone, replaced by a calm, absolute authority that radiated from her like heat. "Please, Orion," she said. Her voice was no longer the smoky rasp of the fire. It was clear, resonant, and it carried the same, unmistakable command he had heard in the creche. "Stand. You, of all people, have never knelt to power. I would be disappointed if you started now." She turned to the stunned, kneeling council. "Rise," she commanded. "The age of kneeling is over. We have much to discuss." She was the queen, the entire time. The blind date, the creche, the fire, the lie. The lie was total. Orion felt a cold, sharp sting of betrayal, followed by a wave of dizzying, terrified confusion. I do not understand," he stammered. "No," Ceres said, her gaze softening as it rested on him. "You do not. But you deserve the truth. All of you." She walked, not to the throne, but to the center of the lattice map, standing on the very spot where her life feed had been severed. "My court," she began, her voice filling the hall, "was compromised. My regent, Malachar Thorn, was a viper I had long watched. But I did not know how deep his venom had spread. I could not trust the reports I was given. I could not trust the lords who bowed to me. I could not trust the crown." She looked at the assembled lords, her gaze as sharp as a scalpel. "Power," she said, "is a shield. It isolates. It blinds. I had to know the truth. I had to know what my people, all my people, were truly made of when the crown was not watching. And so," she continued, "I staged a tragedy. With the help of my one truly loyal royal doctor, I induced a medical hibernation, a state that mimicked the symptoms of lattice fade. I became ill. I let the regency fall to Malachar, to see what he would do, to see who would flock to his side. It was bait, a necessary lie." She turned, her wings brushing the air, to face Orion. I abandoned my throne, and I went to the nest, the place all my lords had forgotten. I became, once again, what I was before I was queen, a trauma nurse. I went to the royal creche. I tended to the young. I listened. Her expression softened. My loyalists, like Bram Tacker, were my eyes. He was watching for people of character, of skill. He told me of a human, a brilliant, broken architect who hid his genius, but who was a good father. Malachar learned of this and saw you as a contingency, a human error to be used as a scapegoat. She smiled, a small, sad smile. I saw you as something else. I needed to know what a human was, not from a diplomatic file, but in person. So I arranged a blind date. Or example, her gaze never leaving his. I wanted to see your value for myself, and I did. In a broken diner, I saw everything. I saw a man who tried to run. Yes, but only to protect his child. And then, when the lacuna hit, when Malachar accelerated his plan, I saw that same man run into a disaster, not for power, not for a crown, but because a stranger, a nurse, had run in first. You did not run to save a queen, Orion. You ran to help a person. She took a step toward him, closing the distance. The court held its breath. I am sorry, Orion, for the deception. It was a lie that saved an empire. It was the only way to draw out the poison. Malachar and his entire network, she gestured to the council, are now exposed. She stopped, just a foot from him. But what happened in that tunnel? That was not a lie. When I held your daughter, when we breathed together, when we made that song, that was not a queen. That was me. That was my heart. My decision to stay with you, was a choice I made long before I chose to return to this throne. Orion just stared at her. The nurse, the queen, the woman who had run into the fire, the woman who had breathed with his daughter. He saw it all, clicking into place. The authority, the command, the absolute, unwavering commitment to the nest. Ceres, he breathed. Your Majesty, he corrected, his voice cracking. She smiled. I believe Ceres will do, at least in private. She turned back to the council, her regal authority returning like a cloak. The old way is broken. Malachar is in chains. The ivory masks are being dismantled. The system failed. As Architect Harlow, Commissioner Harlow, told you, power cannot be held in one hand, not even mine. She gestured to the glowing map. The High Council, in its fear, offered you the regency, a title, a throne. I offer you a job, a very difficult one. I am creating the new, independent role of Lattice Commissioner. You will hold no noble title. You will report only to me. Your budget will be absolute. Your task to build your Academy of Light, to teach us, to teach all of us, to make 10,000 good plumbers, so that no one man, not Malachar, not even a keymaker, can ever hold this station hostage again. Orion looked at this woman, this impossible, brilliant, terrifying woman. He looked at Nova, who was staring at Ceres with a look of pure, unadulterated awe. He saw the path forward, not a throne, not a crown, a workshop, a classroom. He nodded, a single, sharp dip of his chin. I accept, Your Majesty. He cleared his throat, and a small, rebellious, human smile touched his lips. I accept, Ceres. But, on one condition. The High Council gasped as one. The snow-white elder looked faint. "The Academy of Light," Orion said, his voice ringing with the same conviction he'd had in that chamber. "Its first charter, its first budget, its first action will be to rebuild the royal creche. We will start with the nest. We will start with the children. Or we do not start at all." Ceres's smile was not a polite, royal acknowledgement. It was a beam of pure, radiant light. It was the smile he had seen in the diner, the one he had seen in the dark. "I would expect nothing less, Commissioner." The days that followed were a blur. The restoration was swift. Malakar's public trial was a quiet, damning affair. He was shown the proof, his own code, his own signature. He saw Ceres, alive, robed, and on the throne, and his legendary composure shattered. He was sentenced to the silence of the mines on a remote asteroid, a life of labor. Not death, justice, not blood. The ivory masks were formally disbanded. Their featureless, white armor was melted down. In their place, Ceres established the Ho-Duk Bindan, the civilian wing guard. Its first commander, to his eternal shock, was Bram Tacker, who looked profoundly uncomfortable in his new, crisp, blue and gold uniform, a diagnostic scanner clipped to his belt next to his ceremonial sidearm. The Twilight Diner remained. The Twilight Diner. It was still the heart of the station, but it was also, officially, the first satellite campus of the Academy of Light. One night, long after the last student engineer and pediatric patient had left, the diner was quiet. It was scrubbed clean. On a single table, in the booth by the viewport, was a single, glowing, Aurelian starlight flower. Orion stood by the table, in a clean shirt, his hands clasped behind his back. On a simple metal hook by the kitchen, the one Bram usually used for hanging aprons, a small, silver, ceremonial crown hung. It was Ceres's. He heard the door hiss open. She entered, not in her royal robes, but in her simple, charcoal-gray nurse's tunic. She walked over to the hook and, with a small, private smile, hung her greasy, oil-stained mechanic's apron right next to the crown. She turned to him. "Commissioner." "Your Majesty," he replied, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Nova walked in between them. She was not sleepy. She was wide awake, her face bright. She was holding her new, official, Academy-issued datapad. She stood between them, looked at her father, then at the Queen, and she cleared her throat. "I wrote something," she said, her voice clear and strong. She read from the screen. "Mommy used to say that fixing anything is a way of healing. And Daddy said that family is a song. But I think family is a shared breath." She looked up at Ceres, her eyes shining, up wing and down wing, forever. Orion looked at Ceres, the Queen, the nurse, the woman who had stayed. He saw his future. He saw his family. He leaned in, and he kissed her. It was not a kiss of state. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of promise, of partnership, of breath. 6 months later, there was another ceremony. This one was not in a throne room. It was in a vast, noisy, industrial shipyard. A new, gleaming, powerful utility corvette was being christened. It was not a warship. It was the first long-range vessel of the Academy of Light, a ship of plumbers, designed to travel the Empire and heal the Lattice. On its hull, in bright, clear lettering, was its new name, a name Orion had chosen, Rust Dawn, and beneath the name, carved deep into the metal, side by side, were two symbols. The first was the angular, human script for family. The second was the flowing, winged, Aurelian sigil for family. They were not identical, but in the bright, binary starlight, they looked, almost, like a reflection of one another.